Well, hello everybody. I'm trying something out new this week. So we're going to try doing a video series rather than my typical LinkedIn long diatribe on how to accomplish some specific task using a whole bunch of screenshots and a whole bunch of instructions. So what are we here to do today? Well, a common question that comes in is how do we get started with like cloud technology? All right, I'm brand new maybe to technology, or maybe I'm brand new to the cloud. Specifically, I want to learn about AWS. Of course, I do need to throw up a quick disclaimer. Yes, I am employed by AWS as a technical instructor. My opinions, of course, are my own, so just want to throw that out there. So this is my approach. Doesn't have to be, everybody's approach or the official endorsed approach. So without further ado, what do I want to talk about today? I really want to talk about, well, how do I get started? All right. What we're going to focus on here is we're going to initially look at, well, how do I get started for free? Okay. Minimal investment other than my time. Time is one of the most valuable assets we have, so we do want to make sure we effectively utilize that time. But at the same time, how can I learn about this stuff without having to come out of pocket potentially? But if I do want to come out of pocket, what are some resources that I, as Jeff, personally use? So first thing we're going to look at is going to be a platform called SkillBuilder. So just be aware, I will drop all these links also into the video's description, so be on the lookout for that. So what we have here up on the screen share is skillbuilder.aws. This is AWS's digital training platform. What we do want to make you aware of, or what I want to make you aware of specifically, is there is a lot of content here that is free. All right, you don't have to pay for anything. However, if you do elect to pay for some stuff, I do want to show you what the value is of that as well. And of course, to give you my own take, if I'm looking to get up to speed on some new technologies, or I'm looking to achieve a new certification, how might I go about doing it? So we're going to talk about a slew of different things here, so bear with me. So this is the landing page for AWS SkillBuilder. You can see that we do have some tabs across the top here. Let's put some mouse focus on for that so we can kind of see what I'm looking at over here. So we've got, basically the ability, okay, let's learn by a product domain perhaps. Maybe I'm looking to get into data analytics, or maybe I'm looking to just be a cloud practitioner, or I'm looking at something like a solutions architect role. Maybe I want to build practical skills, prepare for exams, or we'll talk about subscriptions coming up here later. So first things first, let's say that we want to explore by a cloud role. So let's go ahead and click on cloud roles here, and let's pick one of these. All right. I am by trade a solutions architect, and normally I gravitate towards that. Cloud operations as well, but I do obviously dabble across all of these areas. So let's go click on Solutions Architect here and see what that does for us. Not too surprising, I'm going to get presented with a lot of different types of content that apply to the Solutions Architect space within AWS. We will see over here in this right-hand column that, some of this stuff is paid, some of this stuff is free. All right. So as we scroll down this list, Introduction to Containers is free. Cool. We've got some game-based learning stuff we can see. We've got some digital classrooms. This is all stuff when we talk about that value proposition for, all right, well, what would I gain by paying a $30 per month subscription to SkillBuilder? All right. Like I said, it's not a sales pitch. I'm just going to show you what's available. We will see, though, there's a mix here of free and paid content. This is not personally the way I choose to use SkillBuilder more times than not. All right, what I'm simply going to do just to get us over to, all right, what's the free stuff, Jeff? We're going to go back here real quick just to get back to the main page. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this search bar right up the top. So search AWS Training Catalog, and I'm just going to hit enter there. All right. That's going to take me over to an area where I can filter down the content that we've got available to us. Specifically, I'm going to go over to this left-hand side, and I'm going to go over to price, and let's filter by free. All right, there's going to be a lot of content that's available here. All right, so we can see that, all right, so we've got Cloud Practitioner Essential 7-hour course. All right, this is going to be similar to the digital courses that we provide. Got exam prep for Cloud Practitioner AWS Certified AI Practitioner. It's one of our newer certifications. So exam prep course for that. How do I prepare for the exam? What do the style of the questions look like? And then pretty much, how would I use this platform at this point? Well, let's go over and actually let's do a little bit more filtering. So let's filter based upon domain. And let's see, what are we interested in? Maybe we're interested in compute today. Or we can see we've got cloud operations there. Or once again, architecting. So let's take a look at architecting. Let's filter that result down. Now, the other thing we do need to be aware of is we offer this, across different languages and things like that as well. If I'm a beginner, maybe I want to filter this just down to stuff that's for fundamental learners. Maybe if I'm intermediate or advanced, I can apply filters there. What type of time commitment am I looking at? So am I looking at shorter bite-sized pieces of content, or am I looking at something a little bit longer? And then finally, what's the type of training that's available? Now, I will tell you, if we go and filter for digital course with lab, that is a paid offering. So if I filter by that, nothing's going to populate here. So we're going to uncheck that for now. Self-paced labs is also going to be the same way. We only provide lab environment if we are utilizing a course that has, is coming from our paid content. So let's take a look at what the content looks like in here. So we've got the Architecting on AWS Online Course Supplement. That goes along with one of our courses. Introduction to the Resilience Hub. And what else do we got? Well-Architected Foundations. Just for the fun of it, let's go ahead and take a look at Well-Architected Foundations. Just to see, all right, if I want to go and take this course, what does this entail? So we'll let that page load up here. And then I will tell that time zone stuff. You can remind me about that later. Not significant for what we're doing today. In a brief moment here, all right, we have basically the opportunity to enroll in this course. You will see that we do provide it across many different languages as well. So if you are not a native English speaker, feel free to pick your applicable language. And basically, it gives me a description here. What is this going to do? It's going to walk us through a tool that's built into the AWS console called the Well-Architected tool that essentially allows us to go and evaluate our workload using a question and answer type of approach to see, are there areas where we are not meeting best practices? So that's essentially what this course would entail. All right, if we go back again, we're going to close out this window and we'll go back and just remove some of these filters. So let's go over to domain. Let's not limit ourselves to just architecting, but big picture stuff. I want to get us an idea of how much content is actually available here for me. So let's sort by newest. All right, so what do we got? AWS Flash, Introduction to AWS Mainframe Modernization. All right, using data unit kicks. Healthcare Learning Plan for Executives. All right. AWS Flash, Exploring Amazon Nova Models using Bedrock. So if you are in the generative AI space and you're looking to get more knowledgeable on how to use some of AWS's new offerings, specifically Nova, and using Amazon's foundational models that are available within Bedrock, this might be a good course for you. If I'm looking to just get started and understand, compute, what does virtual machines look like within AWS? That is where Amazon EC2 getting started would be beneficial. If we scroll down this list, though, we're going to see that it is going to dynamically populate. And if we do some quick math here, we've got 48 pages worth of content. Okay. So what does that mean? 4, 8, let's see, 4, 8, 12. We got 15 courses per slide at 48. What does that mean? That means we've got, almost 48, 50, we'll just call it 50 times 15, right? 700 and something plus courses that are available to us here for free. So not a bad way to get started. However, we've got some other really cool stuff that's available for free too. If you want to start learning AWS from let's say a gamified approach, we're going to take a look at something called CloudQuest. All right, that does have its own domain. So we're going to just do a search for CloudQuest here. And we're going to go and grab one of AWS's links over to CloudQuest, and then we're going to say, try Cloud Practitioner for free. So if you're not aware, what is Cloud Practitioner? Cloud Practitioner is essentially one of our foundational courses. What is it going to teach us about? So Cloud Practitioner is going to teach us about the foundational services that pretty much every customer is utilizing. So what does that entail? Well, that entails things like compute. All right. That's also going to entail things like databases, storage, networking, security, monitoring, scalability. So it's going to give us a little bit of information about a lot of different services that are core to pretty much every business's operations. So let's take a look at this gamified approach and see if this is something that I might be interested in. So let's go ahead and start learning now. And what this is going to do for us, kind of the cool thing that comes along with CloudQuest, is this is a combination of learning materials. It's got objectives that are built into it, but also there are some I would say, practice exercises that's going to utilize lab environments to solve some challenges. You're essentially moving about a city solving business challenges for different areas of the business. So we'll let this load up here for a second, and we'll come back and check in just a moment. All right, just like that, we're back. CloudQuest has loaded up. So let's go ahead and click Start Game here. And let's see what we get. You should hear my speaker and stuff in the background. I'm going to have the volume down somewhat low on that just so it's not annoying us. Actually, we'll go ahead and mute that just so it's not annoying us. There we go. Alrighty. Go through the introductory screens and back into the loading screen. Basically, it's going to ask us to populate some information here so we can give ourselves a name and whatnot, and then we will go and look at solving a challenge in this fictitious virtual environment. All right, so let's choose our role here, right? So who do we want to be today? Well, we're going to be a cloud practitioner, right? Now you will see that there are other roles and assignments that are available. These will be part of the paid offering within SkillBuilder. So we do provide the cloud practitioner for free though. So what are we going to learn about over here? All right. Well, we've got NoSQL databases, cloud economics, just databases in general and practice, auto healing and scaling, compute solutions, networking concepts, core security concepts. Like I said, all that foundational stuff that's relevant for us to utilize essentially to be, get off on our path to the cloud. So we're going to go ahead and choose that role, and then it's going to drop us into the game. And here's where we're going to spend a few minutes customizing our character. I'll go ahead and pause the video while I do that, and then we'll move on here in just a moment. All right. Got a character created, got a character named. You'll see I'm AWS with Jeff up here. Went with kind of some business casual. And it's initially going to start out by pointing us out to all the various features within the game. So we'll go ahead and skip through a couple of these. I'll let you, if you choose to do this, obviously go through at your leisure. There are some other fun stuff here. We'll have, some various critters and stuff running around chasing people. There'll be some drones that you can shoot down and things like that. But let's get started over here, and we're basically going to cruise on over to this individual with an exclamation point over their head. All right. So we're going to tell it we want to route and go, and off we go. Now this is where we're going to be presented with some sort of problem. All right. This gentleman's going to have some sort of issue that we're looking to solve. All right. Or that they're looking to get a solution to. All right. So Mayor Jack wants us to do something for him, right? We're going to earn some gems along the way, customization options, and then we're going to earn points for AWS services, essentially. So we're working towards a level of expertise within different AWS services. So here you can see our learning objectives in this case. Let's create a bucket in S3. All right, let's enable static website hosting on the S3 bucket, and then let's test access to a web page hosted on Amazon S3. Yes, S3 is not only a object storage solution, but it's also a web hosting platform if you choose to do so. Not quite sure why it skipped right to the end here, but we're actually going to back this up and just take a look at this dialogue here real quick. All right, so dialogue back and forth. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm happy to join the team. How can I help? Right? All right, well, we power most of the city's technical infrastructure through our data center, but it takes months to procure and configure data center resources. One thing that the cloud solves for, pretty much near instantaneous access to resources. All right, that's a common problem with provisioning your own infrastructure. Can you give me a specific example? So what are we trying to solve for here? Well, for one, island residents used the city's web portal to view current wave size predictions at the beach. Surfers check for big waves, for example, and families check for smaller waves for safety. Sounds fair? All right. The servers that deliver these wave size projections give us constant problems. We struggle to keep them up and running. Have you considered using AWS Cloud Infrastructure? Your servers and other resources can be significantly more reliable, agile, and resilient. Anything can be agile, reliable, and resilient if we build it appropriately. Cloud makes it easy, though. All right. I've heard a lot about the cloud, but I'm not sure I understand the whole concept. Well, let's talk about S3 then. Cloud computing on the AWS provides us access to technology services such as compute power, storage, and databases. All right. Resources are available on demand. You pay only for what you need. I'm going to start to synopsizing here. Sounds promising, but how can it improve my agility? How many days does it take to bring a server online? Well, we can deploy resources such as servers in minutes and at a fraction of the cost of traditional resources. The reason for that is we don't need to, pay for all that hardware and or software up front. We can basically monetize that over an hourly, maybe down to the microsecond basis, depending on the service we're utilizing. So, well, that's truly fast. Yes, I have a Beachwave web page that I need to quickly get back online. We also want the entire website to be more resilient to hardware failures. So we're going to introduce a serverless service here. That one's going to be the S3 service. All right. Does it include any scripts that must run on the web server? This is important to understand for S3. If it does any server-side compiling or anything like that, it can't run in S3. However, things that are processed client-side, such as JavaScript, excellent use case for using something like a static website hosted in S3. So if it's client-side processing and you want it as a web page and you want to host it basically in an S3 bucket, you can absolutely do that. All right. It says the website is static. That definitely helps, right? All right. So because you're running a static website, we can migrate your web page to an S3 bucket and use the static website hosting feature. So that's essentially what we're going to get into here. All right. Using S3, you can store any type amount of data and retrieve it from anywhere. After we upload your data into S3 bucket, we can enable the static website hosting feature on the bucket. All right. S3 is a fully managed service. It also is a serverless service, dynamically scales to meet your demands. Awesome. All right. So that gets us pretty much to the synopsis here. So let's go ahead and accept this assignment. Can't wait. So what we're going to get presented now with is a gamified approach essentially to solving this business challenge. So let's let that load up. Here we go. And we're going to have an introductory video. I'm going to go ahead and pause this and walk through essentially what we're doing here. So we're going to talk to you about the service. We're going to introduce the core concepts and whatnot through a quick video. We're going to go ahead and skip through that just so I'm not replaying the whole video for you. Now we're going to get an architectural overview. And you'll see that we do have various links. We've got a 10-step process down here. So if we go and click here, it's going to take us over to various videos that are part of this particular challenge. All right. So we've got videos on S3, additional features, as well as access management. We've got the well-architected overview. That's a newer component. And we've also got a couple of videos in here about AWS's global infrastructure and the benefits of the way that architecture is built out. So why does AWS use this concept of an availability zone? Why does each region within AWS need at least 3 availability zones? We'll answer those types of questions through this. If you don't know the answers to those, by all means, feel free to watch all those videos and you're going to get a nice quick overview of how all this works out. At that point, we're basically going to go through the various components of this architecture. So we're going to have a website hosted over here in S3. Right? We're going to have a bucket policy that dictates who can or cannot access this object. And it's going to be essentially present us with a city web portal at the end. So we can see we've essentially got 10 steps here where it's going to talk about the architecture. So we're just going to fairly efficiently step through these because I do want to get you over to the lab side so I can show you, well, essentially what do I get to do if I use something like this CloudQuest service for cloud practitioner level of knowledge. So that gets us through our 10 steps. All right. And then what we need to do is we need to advance into the practice phase. This is where we'll actually put this into practice. Once again, a small introductory video to give us an overview. All right. So we're going to have a step-by-step guide that's going to help us to create an S3 bucket and upload a static object to it. All right. Each one of these lab environments is going to have a guided section. That's going to be basically section number 2, where we're going to practice using step-by-step instructions. And then we're going to have a DIY exercise at the end, which essentially allows you to go and test out your knowledge with very minimal instructions to solve a particular challenge. So let's go ahead and skip this portion just so I can, like I said, I can move us into the fun stuff, right? So let's skip forward into the practice section. We're going to go ahead and skip this video once again because I know what it's asking me to do already over here, and I'll basically step us through this here rather efficiently. So we've got a set of instructions over here, and we've got a 17-step process here. So let's go to step number 2. Step number 1 is the overview. Step number 2, it's going to tell us, all right, well, we need to open the console. Okay. So we're going to hit Start Lab over here first, and now we're going to hit Open Console. Now this is a training, basically an account that's owned by our training team. All right. So we'll go ahead and click Open Console here, which is going to open that in a new tab. Now, what I will say when you're doing this is a best practice. It's a good idea to put the instructions on one screen and then also have the console on the other. Otherwise, you're trying to do something like this, right? Which doesn't work out too well unless you've got a really high resolution monitor, right? I mean, for the sake of exercise here, we can certainly do this. So I got the console on one side, I've got the lab steps on the other. They're kind of on the small side here though. So maybe we go and resize this just a little bit. But like I said, it does behoove you to have two monitors up and running to pretty much make this a more efficient and easy process. So let's go ahead and reattach these tabs and we'll just kind of flip back and forth for the time being. So over to CloudQuest. All right, so we've got a list of steps. So it says review the ready message. We are already ready. We've got the console open, and that's pretty much what we're seeing up here on the top left-hand side. All right. Directions on how to access the console. Excellent. All right. Basically, it's asking us to go over to the S3 service. All right, we'll do that in just a moment. It's asking us to go over to a general purpose bucket that's already been created for us. It's going to be called website bucket, and it's going to have some alphanumeric string to make it globally unique. Cool. All right. Let's see. You must use this bucket name in the later DIY solution. All right. Open the Objects tab. 5 files should be displayed. Check the checkbox for this text.html, and we're going to rename that. We're probably going to rename that to, actually, I don't know what we're going to rename it to. Let's see. We're going to call that one error.html. So we're going to switch over and accomplish those few tasks here real quick. So we'll go over here and go over to the S3 service. Right, so over to S3. Now it asked us to go and look at the general purpose buckets once this console page loads. We're going to go over to the one that had website bucket with some alphanumeric strings in it. So let's go ahead and select that bucket name. Then it asks us to go down to the text.html file. All right. Once we're here, I am going to change this to dark mode just because I do have a preference for that. It looks a little bit more easier on the eyes. It's less glaring to me personally. So we're going to go over to the Actions tab hanging out over here on the right-hand side. All right, we're going to go down here, and what do we need to do? We need to rename the object. We're doing this so that if we run into any errors on this website, we're going to have this error.html page automatically set up, and that will load if we can't load any of the particular pages or assets we're trying to load. All right, so that's basically the first, 5, 6 steps there. So let's go back and get the next block of steps and see, all right, what are we doing next? Well, now it says in the success alert, review the message. Next, we're going to go over to permissions. Excellent. This is where we're going to work with this thing called a bucket policy. What is a bucket policy needed for? Well, we'll learn through security related modules and whatnot that the bucket policy essentially is how we give permissions to maybe the public, to read this object. All right. One thing we want to be aware of here is S3 buckets are not public by default. We have to go through about a 4 or 5 step process in order to make those publicly accessible. So if you ever see anything about someone's S3 bucket being, made publicly accessible, it doesn't just happen, okay? Automation can make it happen in your own account if you've got it configured to do so, but it's a multi-step process, so it doesn't just it doesn't just natively happen. So it's asking us to basically review this policy right now, which we'll go and do in just a moment. After we do that, it wants us to go to the properties, all right? And this is where we're going to check and see, all right, is this what type of encryption are we using? This is also where we're going to go and check for things like, is this set up for website hosting and things like that. And that's where we see down at the bottom here that we're going to do some editing here. And right now we can see S3 static website hosting is not turned on. We're going to turn that feature on after we take a look at the properties and whatnot. Now remember that text.html file that we just renamed to error.html. Here's where we're going to specify that. This should give us some indication here that S3, at least when we're doing static website hosting, is essentially using the S3 service as a web server. And behind the scenes, S3 is absolutely a web server. So let's go through those couple of tabs here real quick. So let's go over to the permissions. This is where we will have to turn off a setting if we wanted to publicly expose this bucket. So I would need to turn off block public access settings. Next up, I need to have some sort of permissions that allow the public to view these resources in this bucket. That's where we have this thing called a resource policy configured. Specifically, we are allowing an API action of S3 get object for the objects that are in this bucket that we've identified. So if we kind of zoom in here and take a look at that in a little bit more detail, we've got an effect, we've got an action, and we've got a resource. All right, so we are allowing one specific API call, which is S3 get object, that will allow whoever's defined as the principal to perform this action. A principal of star is the permission that we would need to give the general public, anybody that's unauthenticated to AWS, access to retrieve the objects in this bucket. If you are setting up an S3 static website and you're not using any other services in front of it like CloudFront, this is exactly the way you would have your settings configured. So go ahead and zoom back out here. So that is as we expect it to be. Let's go over to that properties tab then. So we can see basically some details about this bucket. It's over in the US East 1 region. All right, we can see the creation date and its Amazon resource name. Every object within AWS, or every resource, I should say, let me use the proper term here, will have an ARN. That's how everything is uniquely identified. Not super important for what we're doing right now, but at least want to call out that configuration. We can see that the objects in this bucket are encrypted using server-side encryption using the S3 service. And then lastly, we wanted to go down here and we wanted to set this bucket up for what? S3 website static hosting. So we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. We're going to hit this edit button and we're going to turn on static website hosting. And now we need to tell it where to find our files. So when someone hits the root of our domain, we want them to load the index.html file. If they request something that doesn't exist, we want them to reach the error.html file. And that's pretty much all we're going to do as far as our settings here. And we're going to save changes. Now, what has happened now is we've actually got two different ways to access this S3 bucket. We can access it using a regular URL, an S3 URI rather, or an HTTPS URL, or we can access it using a unique URL that was just generated specifically for static website access. So we're going to copy this link to the clipboard just because I have an idea what the next steps are going to be here. So essentially, did we do everything here, right? We enabled static website hosting, turn that feature on, set our index and error messages accordingly, got our URL, just copied that to the clipboard. And now if we go to the next, it's going to say scroll down to the bottom, hit save changes, which we did. Then it's going to ask us to review our settings, and it's going to ask us to clip that and copy that to the clipboard. Hey, it's like I knew what we were going to do here. All right. And now what it wants us to do, let's go test out that website and see if it actually functions. So we'll come over here and open a new tab, and let's paste that URL in there. And what do you know? We've got the beach conditions up here. Just for fun, though, we're going to try and go to access a resource that does not exist. So we're going to access index1.html here. All right. And that is going to take us over to the page not found, that error page. So this is the custom error. This is that text.html file that we initially looked at that we renamed over to error.html. We can validate that because I can access that URL directly as well, or that HTML file directly as well. So just a way to dynamically redirect us if something that is requested is not accessible. And if you're new to web technologies and whatnot, 404 is an HTML error code that indicates that essentially we call this a client-side error. That basically means that, hey, the resource that you have requested does not exist. Something about the request you've made is invalid. So that gets our static website up and running. That also gets us to the end of the practice section, which is section 3 of our lab. So let's go over here and let's go to the DIY section. And of course, going to have some text coming in there as well. Once again, I am going to skip that. All right, and what's it asking us to do here? It asks us to rename the index.html file to waves.html. So just to test out the validation mechanism here, we're going to go grab the bucket name. All right, I can get that in a few different ways. I can get it basically right out of the address bar up here at the top. Ideally, though, the way that we're going to get that is we're actually going to get it from the object. So you can see right up here at the top, bucket name is hanging out right here. We're going to go ahead and copy that to our clipboard. And we're going to go check and make sure that it doesn't tell me that I have successfully done something when I have not. So let's hit that validate button. We're going to wait a second. And it's telling me here, hey, we could not find the waves.html file. Okay, well, let's go and do what it asked us to do. So once again, very high level instructions, right? It doesn't give us a whole lot of information. It does give us a hint down here though, but the idea here is to challenge what you've learned in this particular, this particular module. So we're going to go over to that index.html file. We're going to go over to actions and we're going to go to rename object. And I need to change index to waves. All right, let's hit save our changes over here. Now we'll go back and double check our validation. So we'll hit the validate button here again. And with any luck, there'll be some fanfare. We'll hear some music. If I had the music turned on, we'll get those points awarded and whatnot. And we have successfully completed this lab pretty much. We've successfully completed this challenge, and we've learned along the way if we watched all of those videos and went step by step through the architecture. So now the mirror wants to talk to us because we have successfully accomplished the task that was set forward. So let's go over here and let's see what the mirror's got to say. Thanks for providing a quick and effective solution. All right, you're welcome. Looks like the beach crowd is returning. And then this is some of the reward systems that'll come into the game so you can decorate your city and things like that, just to make it a little bit more fun. And that way you've got something to show for your time. Obviously, you will have learned along the way as well. But like I said, this is where we're going to gain points. We can do customizations and whatnot as well. And there's our fanfare and fireworks. And you can also see this does use essentially a points-based system. So we have leveled up. Our player rank has been increased to level 2. That will have also opened up additional challenges and stuff for us. So that's pretty much, it's going to be a structured approach. Here's those drones that I mentioned. All right, we can use our little taser over here to shoot down drones and whatnot, gain some points in the game as well. So this is one example of something that's free out there and available to you. I do advise, if you do go through this stuff, please take the time to give us feedback. If there's anything that didn't work for you, you can always use the give additional feedback button over here. It's going to run you through a survey basically and ask you questions about, all right, what worked, what didn't work, is there anything we can improve and things like that. So last thing we need to do before we wrap up basically this portion of my talk is we're going to sign out of the AWS console over there. We'll close out a few of these additional web pages that we've got open. So that gives you a bit of an introduction to CloudQuest essentially, as well as giving us an introduction to how this gamified approach works and see if this is something that might be valuable for you. All right, if you're just getting started, it's a great way to have a structured way to lead through learning the core AWS services. Of course, if I want to learn more about S3 after the fact, well, we can go back over here to SkillBuilder, assuming that I click on the right window, and we can go over here and say, well, I want to search the catalog and I want to look for S3 now. So let's pull up all the various various modules essentially we have on the S3 service. We're still looking at the free stuff here, so you can see there is a whole S3 learning plan. This is going to be a structured, regimented approach that's just going to lead through a sampling of these various digital courses that are available to you. All right. So that pretty much covers the free stuff. I also want to take the time to show you, all right, if we purchased a subscription through a SkillBuilder here, what would that give me? All right. So if you wanted to take like an ILT course with AWS that's being offered through like your employer, okay, always a great thing to take advantage of. Sometimes though, we don't have that option. Our employer isn't offering training, or we're not part of a department that's currently, involved with AWS initiatives. So if I were to purchase my own subscription to SkillBuilder, what type of content would I gain access to? So we are going to basically switch tabs. So what I have here, you'll notice that it switched over to an incognito tab. I am logged in with a different account, one that does have a subscription associated with it. So we're going to filter by subscription needed here, just to show that, all right, I am, it should have said subscribed Interesting. Let me pause for a second and take a look. It might have logged me out when I wasn't looking, so just a moment. Alrighty, and just like that, we're back. Now we can see that it says subscribed. It had signed me into a different account, which I wasn't expecting. It should have been signed in correctly in the background, but maybe I overlooked that. So what we'll see now is we get access to a lot more content, essentially. All right. You can see that I can go do a self-paced lab on security monitoring. That means I could go in and just do a lab specifically, in this focus area. I don't have to do any additional training. Just open up a lab environment, follow some instructions, go complete a task within an AWS Training and Certification account. Let's see if we wanted to do some labs on S3, since we just talked about that. All right, how we would do that. All right, so we do see in these pink boxes here that there are a number of S3 labs that are available to us. If I wanted to filter just down to those self-paced labs, we can go over to the type of content again over here on the left-hand side, and I can say just show me self-paced labs. So this is going to allow me to run through a number of different labs specifically, or that have some sort of affiliation with S3. What I want to point out to us, though, is one of the bigger things that I think is available as a part of the subscription, and that is something called a digital course with lab. What these allow us to do, we're going to search for the word architecting up here. There's a course called Architecting on AWS. It is what I would consider to be a foundational course for anybody looking to get involved with AWS. So we can either attend like an Architecting on AWS course through our employer, or we could take it as a digital course with a lab. Actually, I'm sorry. I clicked on the... No, that's right. I'm in the right place. I'm just not seeing what I'm looking for here. Yeah, my apologies. I do have the wrong thing selected here. So we're not looking for digital course with lab. What we're looking at is an offering called AWS Digital Classroom. Leave it to me to forget the name of the thing while I'm trying to show you all about it. So what we can see here is there is this digital classroom called Architecting on AWS. This is a 24-hour course. All right. This is essentially the same course that we provide to our customers as part of a virtual delivery or an in-person delivery for, Architecting on AWS. So we cover all of the same content. You've got access to all of the same labs that we would do essentially. So great way to learn AWS. The downside here is, well, what is the downside? Well, I don't have an instructor that I can interactively communicate with. That would say that's the downside, I would say, to any type of digital classroom type of course that you take. You're watching someone deliver the course, but at the same time, I can't go and ask questions of them. So that's really where the value of something like an in-person training is really, really beneficial. But what I do want to show us, though, is pretty much the makeup of this. So give us just a minute. We'll let this load up. We'll go ahead and start our module, and we're going to skip ahead here just a little bit. All right, I'm going to skip through this first section because I don't personally need the welcome information. But for you, if you want to see, all right, what are the objectives? What's the description of this course and things like that? Those are all going to be laid out right here for you. All right. How to use the course. Basically, this is going to be how to navigate the platform and whatnot. Meet the instructors. So who are the instructors that actually put this together? All right. We've got Raf and Russ, who are the instructors that their sessions were recorded. And that's basically what we're going to be provided with as part of this content. We're going to skip the introduction here real quick, and I'm going to get into the core content. And we'll skip over the pre-assessment. We'll go over to module number 1. So if we scroll down here real quick, we're going to see that there are a number of modules that are built into this course. All right, it's actually got 13 modules. All right, that's the same as our in-person training. So we're going to cover all of the same materials. So architecting fundamentals. All right, let's jump in here real quick. We'll pop open the video just so I can show you what this looks like. And then we'll jump over to one of the lab environments so I can show you what that looks like as well, just to give you some insight into, all right, what's part of a paid subscription, and personally, what do I think is one of the more valuable components that come along with that. All right. So we got our overview section, and we're going to have a quick introduction as part of a video here. We're going to skip over that one. We're going to go over to our introduction to AWS services. And now essentially we see we got a 3-minute video here where Raf is giving us an introduction to the various AWS services and what we're going to cover as part of the course. So we'll cover the services. We'll cover AWS infrastructure. This is going to be similar to the videos we would have watched through CloudQuest when we were talking about the AWS global infrastructure. Same type of content here. See, we got a 10-minute, well, just shy of 11-minute video here that's going to cover all that content for us. We'll cover the well-architected framework coming up next. And then we're going to have pretty much at the end of just about every module, we're going to have some questions to test your knowledge. All right. That way you can go and validate, did I get the expected knowledge out of the course that, the curriculum designers expected me to understand? And that would lead us essentially through module number 1. Module number 2, we're going to cover account security. We're going to cover networking. This says networking part 1 over here. So this is going to be networking within a VPC. If you don't know what a VPC is yet, that's okay. You're going to learn about it as part of networking. Think about this as a network that's all contained within one logical boundary. All right. What we'll learn later on when we get into further content is we're going to see that we've got, networking part 2, which is going to be more about connecting different logical networks together. Those could be connecting networks that are in the cloud. They could be connecting networks that are on premises to the cloud as well. All right. Where is lab number 1? So we've got exploring and interacting with the management console. That's an okay lab, gives you a good introduction to using the console. I think lab number 2, at least for my discussion with you all here, is a little bit more compelling. So I am going to bring up this lab number 2 here just to give you some insight into how this would function for you all. So let's go ahead and hit start that module here. And we're more than likely going to have to pause here coming up because this lab environment is going to have to be provisioned on demand for us. So it says this should take approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes to complete. You might get done in 30 minutes if you're fairly proficient with AWS. You might get done in an hour to hour and 15 to an hour and 30 if you're less proficient. Cool thing is, take your time in here, all right? We're going to skip the tour, all right? What we are going to be presented with, we've got a set of lab instructions on the left-hand side and basically a table of contents for the lab. And then we've got architecture diagrams. We've got a description of the lab overview. We've got the objectives for this particular lab. And of course, we're going to have an icon key. Keep an eye out for those. So let's go ahead and hit the Start Lab button. And I do acknowledge that I am going to use this lab environment in an appropriate manner. I'm not going to try to exploit the services that are in the lab for my own benefit. All right. Now, this one did provision pretty much immediately for us. So what's going to happen at this point is we're going to open the console. So that's going to federate our access into a lab environment, which we'll see refresh here in just a moment. And of course, as I always do, I'm going to go here and change my settings over to dark view, or dark mode, excuse me, just because it's a little bit easier on my eyes. And we need to click on a couple boxes to save some cookies, basically. Now, what you will see in our lab environments, you only have access to things that are necessary for you to complete the lab. So this landing page here, I immediately see, this one area over here under cost and usage. I've got all these access denied messages. That's by design. You don't need access to cost and usage information to perform this lab, so therefore you don't have access to those API calls. You'll learn more about how we control things like that as part of the security module, which was module number 2 in this course. So at this point, it's very similar to what we did in CloudQuest. We're going to go through our instructions here. We're going to take a look at the scenario, and then it's going to tell us, all right, well, task number 1, we're going to create a VPC in our region. Now, like I said, I'm not going to run through this in its entirety, all right, but I am going to point out a couple of new things that are available to us. Now, something that we released during reInvent this year and something that I worked on behind the scenes through Q3 and Q4 last year was something called our Learning Assistant. Anything that you highlight in this lab environment, even though you don't have an instructor available to you, you do have an interactive chatbot that is going to help you with various aspects of this lab. So if you get stuck on anything, you have any questions about anything, highlight the text and you can click over here where it says Ask Learning Assistant. So let's pop that open, and it pre-populated some dialogue for me in here. Please explain task number 1, create an Amazon VPC. The chatbot is then going to give us a description of essentially creation of the VPC, some settings that we're going to use and whatnot. We are going to collapse that down for the moment. I'm going to scroll back down here. We're going to ask it a question. All right. So let's go down here and let's find a compelling question. Let's take a look at step number 9 here. So it says for editing the VPC settings, for the DNS settings, enable DNS host names. I want to ask it, I'm going to use a free form question here. And I'm just going to say, at step number 9, what does enable DNS host names do for me? Let's see how it responds. Let's see if it gives us a good response. I know what the answer should be, and it says here, enabling DNS hostnames in the VPC settings provides the following benefits. When you enable DNS hostnames, it assigns a friendly DNS name to the EC2 instance. That's going to be basically our virtual machine in the cloud, to make it easier to connect to your instances. So basically, our EC2 instances are going to get a DNS hostname, and then I can make HTTP requests or whatever I want to do to that DNS hostname, in addition to using its IP address. So did a pretty good job of explaining, all right, well, that's why we're accomplishing that particular task. So be aware that, this is incorporated into our lab environments. It is a very beneficial asset. So at least you can interact with a chatbot and get answers to questions while you're running through this lab. You can also, if you get stuck on something or something's not working, you can ask it a question about a step, and it's going to refer back to previous steps that you may have overlooked. So once again, very, very beneficial. So that's essentially the way these labs are going to be broken out. So you have access to an AWS account, and you have access to an instruction set in order to accomplish a goal. In this case, our goal for this particular lab is to put a network infrastructure in place from scratch, and then later on we will go and incorporate things like an EC2 instance, which we're going to see right down here. So we're going to create a public security group. We are going to create an EC2 instance. We're going to connect to it and verify that the web server that it was pre-installed on it is functioning as expected. All right. So a lot of fun to be had in here, a lot of stuff to learn. And like I said, this all is part of that subscription. So get an idea. All right, if I didn't want to purchase a subscription here, on a monthly basis, what benefit would that provide me? Okay. So SkillBuilder, excellent resource. I am going to show us one other resource as well. So we'll go ahead and close out of a couple of windows here. All right. So there are other paid training opportunities out there as well. Me personally, I use SkillBuilder, and I also use some training from a gentleman named Adrian Cantrell. Adrian used to work for Linux Academy. They got bought out. He went freelance, and now he's got his own content that he's building and deploying. Now, Adrian's content is going to be a little bit different than what we do here in the AWS, SkillBuilder platform. When you are taking a course with AWS, all right, be it a digital course like what we have through SkillBuilder, or a course that is instructor-led, be it virtual or in person, we are teaching you how to use AWS services from a best practice perspective. All right. When you utilize Adrian's courses, he's going to teach you best practices, but he's also going to have a particular focus, and that is providing you with relevant content and experience as far as attaining and achieving AWS certifications. So we're not going to teach you to pass a certification test as part of our courses. We're going to teach you how to do things from a best practice perspective, so the infrastructures you deploy are following best practices. You always want to go back and validate that, especially if you inherit some existing architectures, you want to make sure that they were deployed in a best practice state as well. All right. So if you can deploy services and resources in a best practice state, you're going to do well on AWS exams. But the main focal point of what I'm trying to basically make you understand here is our courses don't teach you to pass the exam. All right. We teach you the best practices to utilize the services, having an understanding of how to do things right and wrong, and how to pick the right service over, a service that is maybe less cost effective than, one solution or the other. That's what's going to help you pass an AWS exam. So Adrian's courseware does just that. He focuses on our domains of information. So when I say domains of information, let's take a step back here real quick. And we're going to go over to the Prepare for Exams tab over here. I skipped over that one earlier. So let's prepare for the Solutions Architect exam. Not really the intent here of what I wanted to cover, but it's still relevant. All right. What you're going to get when you go and click on that Prepare, you're going to get like a learning plan over here. This is going to be a mix of free and paid content. So if we just kind of browse through this list here, so I see the first two under Getting to Know the Exam, we've got 2 free and 1 paid. All right. Get down here a little bit farther, technical essentials, well-architected foundations. These are all free, all right? And then we get down into some other stuff. So SimuLearn, all right? This is similar to what we did in CloudQuest, but it's not from that gamified approach. Same type of idea, but we're not using a gamified approach. We're just jumping right into that content to learn about specific topics, such as, deploying RESTful APIs within AWS. So that's going to be part of the paid content. The key thing to keep in mind here is, there is a decent mix here of free and paid content, so just be aware of that. The other thing I want to make you aware of, all right, is if you are looking to get certified, all right, download the exam guide and pay attention to the content that's contained within there. I've got some other LinkedIn posts on this already, so I'm just going to do a quick recap of things to be aware of, right? The exam guide is going to tell you essentially what are the domains of knowledge you need to have information in and how much of each test is broken up into each domain of knowledge. It's also going to have an appendix that tells us which AWS services can appear on the exam and then which AWS services are out of scope for the exam. It's also going to tell us the type of questions. All right, we're going to have multiple choice and multiple response. And I think there are a couple of other key things to realize here. All right, there are 50 questions on this particular exam that affect your score. There are going to be 15 unscored questions. All right, that means there's a total of 65, but only 50 of those count towards your score. The other thing you need to be aware of, all right, is we have a grading criteria or a scoring system that's going to vary from 100 to 1,000 points, so minimum and maximum. The minimum score to achieve this certification on this particular exam is going to be 720. Now, there is another component here to be aware of, all right? Let's see. Each section of the exam has a specific weight, so some sections have more questions than others. Some questions are going to be worth more than others, depending on, what the statistics tell us the level of difficulty for a particular question is. So what does that mean for you? That means if I go in here and say, I know for certain I got 40 out of 50 questions correct. Well, be aware that if for those 40 that you are absolutely certain you got correct, they could have different weights. You could have got 40 questions correct that you know are correct that are on the easier spectrum, and you may not quite have that 720 or that 72%, score available to you. So just be aware of that. Another thing to point out is you can't get a question right if it's unanswered, okay? So what does that mean? It means don't leave any questions unanswered. If one of them is more difficult or less difficult, or I should say more difficult would be the correct statement there. If it's more difficult and you're not quite sure, there's going to be an option on the exam to mark it for later, all right? Put a check mark on that and move on. You don't want to get to the end of your exam and suddenly realize you've got 15 questions left to answer and you've got 5 minutes to do it in, okay? In which case you're going to go back and speed read through the stuff and you're going to, randomize, picking answers that you think might be right. So if you're on something that's particularly difficult for you, mark it and come back to it later. Get as much done as you can based upon what you know and, move on from there. So last section we're going to look at here, we've got the domains of knowledge here. What I recommend is just go through here and ask yourself the question, all right? When it comes to the orchestration of containers, talking about ECS and EKS here, can I effectively describe how that works, what the service's intent is, and could I implement it, all right? If we're talking about databases, do I know when to use read replicas? If you don't, make a note of that and go do some research, fill in any knowledge gaps that you have. That's where these domains, at least for me personally, are beneficial. When we get down to the bottom here towards the appendix, though, that's the other section I mentioned. Pretty much just be aware of this, all right? So let's cruise on down here and technology and concepts that might appear on the exam, all right? Then we've got in-scope AWS services and features. Now you're going to see that this is a nice long list of AWS services. At a minimum, all right, I would know what each one of these services does. Do I know what data exchange does? Do I know what data pipeline does? Okay. But if we go and just add up how many different topics we have here, that exceeds 65, okay? Every one of these services is not going to appear on the exam. It's just the way it is, but they could appear on the exam, so just be aware of that. If you know what a specific service does, and you're reading through a question on the exam, and that question has nothing to do with this particular service, in this case, Elastic Block Store, I can effectively eliminate that as one of my possible answers. So you want to approach the test from that perspective. You also want to pay attention to things that you shouldn't be studying. All right, don't waste your time searching or researching cloud search. It's out of scope for this particular exam. If you're an Apache Airflow customer, if you use Apache Airflow in your environments already, all right, I don't need to have any knowledge of Apache Airflow, and specifically the Amazon managed workflows for Apache Airflow service. All right, it's not part of the exam. So pay attention to this, because this is going to, give you a list of things that you can essentially set by the wayside, at least for this particular exam. All right. All right, we're coming up on just about an hour, which is about what I was expecting today. So we're going to cover one more thing. And like I said, there is some third-party content that I do personally use in addition to SkillBuilder, just because me personally, I don't like to fail exams, okay? I like to learn best practices, obviously. I teach this stuff day in and day out, but that still doesn't mean that, I just go and sign up for a quest. That doesn't mean that I just go sign up for an exam and just, head full bore into it without doing my due diligence. So my due diligence encompasses going through courseware through SkillBuilder. The other thing that we do have available to us, and let me scoot back here. I know I'm jumping around just a little bit, so my apologies there. We are going to step back into SkillBuilder here real quick. I do want to make sure that you're aware that we also do have some practice exams that are going to be part of learning tracks as well. So be aware on that prepare for exam section. We're going to jump back in there just for a moment. We're going to jump back over to Solutions Architect just so I can get us back to the right spot. There are generally, for each one of our certifications through SkillBuilder, there's going to be 2 practice exams. All right. One of those is going to be more simplistic. One of those is going to be more advanced. So you can see here's the more simplistic one right here, right? AWS Prep Official Practice Question Set. All right. This is going to include 20 questions. This is free. All right. Another one that we have is going to be a full-blown simulation of an AWS exam. All right. And that is going to be right down. Is it the last one down here? Yep. So it's right down here. The official practice exam, this is going to be part of the paid offering. This is going to be a full 65 questions. It's going to be structured just like an AWS exam. Now, these particular exams, these practice exams are written by the same teams that write our exam questions. All right? You're not going to find the same questions on the exam as you are on the practice. However, they're going to be written in a similar fashion. They're going to be of a similar level of difficulty. Use these exams not to memorize questions and answers, because that's going to do you no good. Okay. Utilize these practice exams to find any gaps in your knowledge. All right. So go through that, identify if you got a block of questions, incorrect on some certain services or certain areas of technology. Make sure you make note of those. Go, brush up on your knowledge of those before you schedule an exam. All right. That's kind of my soapbox on that. All right. So last thing we're going to talk about here, I'm on the wrong screen, is we're going to go over to, let's see, Cantrill, assuming I can spell, .io. So this one does happen to be bookmarked here. So like I said, I do find Adrian Cantrill's content beneficial. I do find it, at least from my perspective, affordable. And for those that are brand new to AWS, me personally, I really like the structure and the approach that Adrian takes to delivering his content. So you can see here, all right, he does have some bundles. He also has, course material for specific certifications. So if we're looking for that Solutions Architect Associate or Solutions Architect Professional, or we're interested in both of those and we want to save a little bit of money, I can bundle both of those together. Like I said, the way that Adrian approaches this is he's going to go step by step, through each one of the various AWS services, the core concepts. He's going to basically do an instructor implementation of some solutions. He also has a GitHub repository with all of the instructions. He also uses some automation templates and things like that to get your accounts, set up for particular demonstrations and things. So Adrian classifies the labs essentially as a demo as part of his course material goes. You do not get access to a lab account. Okay, so you will need to have a sandbox account maybe provided through your employer for learning, hopefully. Or if you don't, you can sign up for your own AWS account. That's another thing that I really like that Adrian does well is for the most part, Adrian's courses are going to use services that fall under what's called the free tier. These are services that you can use with AWS for free. We have some services that are free for lifetime, right? We have some services that are free for the first 12 months of your account. And then we'll have some services that come as part of trials. It just kind of depends. But if you, like I said, if you're going to do this through your own personal account, Adrian's going to walk you through basically setting up and testing this, putting these demonstrations into practice, but also going through and tearing them down after the fact so you're not incurring any expense. There are a few instances, I believe, where there are some services that do have some cost associated with them. What I will say is if you follow Adrian's advice and you go through the Solutions Architect Associate course material, and you need to use a mix of free tier and some services that aren't part of that free tier, assuming you clean up everything as you're supposed to at the end of those labs and don't leave anything up and running, you're looking at a bill through the entirety of his course of less than $10. Okay, it's more than likely less than that, but I'm accounting for maybe inadvertently leaving some services running. Adrian's also going to walk you through setting up some billing alerts, so that way you know if your account is going to exceed, say, $10 per month in spending. That's a quick indicator to you that, hey, I might have forgot to turn something off. So that's pretty much what I got for us today, everybody. So hopefully this video has been beneficial. I'm going to get it uploaded onto YouTube, and we'll get it published over to LinkedIn as a learning article for anybody that's looking to get started in AWS, get started with cloud technology. And how do I do that from a free perspective? We've got all of that content that's available through SkillBuilder as well as CloudQuest for the cloud practitioner portion anyways. And then if you opt to look at subscription-based services, we've obviously got subscriptions for SkillBuilder, which opens up a ton of content, offers an incredible value for what you get out of it, assuming you've got time to dedicate to training. And then if you are looking to get certified and you want to go through maybe a course that's a little bit more structured towards not just implementing services from a best practice perspective, but you're more interested in learning things that are going to apply directly to the exam domains and whatnot, then Adrian Cantrell's courses are great for that as well. So with that said, everybody, if you got any feedback for me, please feel to drop that on LinkedIn. Feel free to drop that onto this YouTube comment section as well. And also, this is the first video I'm releasing in my newly created YouTube channel, AWS with Jeff. So expect more content to come as I come up with more creative information that I want to share out with you that I think is relevant. And if there's anything that in particular that you would like to see, all right, let me know. We can definitely do some crowdsourcing here. So if there's something you want to see specific, I'll see what I can do about putting some content together based upon your requests as well. So with that said, hopefully everybody has a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.